It's a hallmark of modern pedagogy, which begins in the late 1700s, that as a form of teaching, music is broken down into its component parts, and then exercises are made up that address those component sonic textures that are going to be used in repertoire. And that's essentially what drives a lot of pedagogical exercises to this very day. I've always thought that, we've seen the efficacy of doing that in gaining fluency in different kinds of gestures very rapidly by focusing on one thing at a time. For my students, I have them do the same thing with expressive gestures. And so essentially, it works in 3 tiers. And they're all internally motivated. So the first thing that I suggest to them is that they should think of an emotion that they want to convey, and then make one sound, one pitch that will carry that emotion. So for example, if you wanted to play a sound that was going to be mischievous and cheeky and somewhat puck-like, and think of that emotion, you might go. If you wanted to play, I'm going to play a chord now, if you wanted to play a chord that was majestic, then you probably wouldn't go, but rather. If you thought of an emotion that was brutal, then maybe something like a chord like that. And so essentially, their assignment is to take a series of adjectives that describe emotions, nouns that describe emotion, and then make one sound, either a pitch or a chord that makes that emotion and that's internally generated. Beethoven, at the top of the score of the Missa Solemnis, wrote, "From the heart, may it go to the heart." And I think for a performer, the million-dollar question is, how do you get into the heart? And internal motivation is one big part of that in terms of shaping sound. The second step is to play a motive, a very short motive, maybe 3 notes, maybe 5 notes, once again also conveying a particular emotion. So if we were going to do something that was maybe somewhat bittersweet or melancholy, the idea there in A minor, vibrating the minor third, and then also the flat 6th degree. This can be made up in the ear, but I also advise my students to use what they know about the structure of music to help them to create their emotions just as composers do. And then the next step, the 3rd tier, would be to make up small harmonic progressions that will cadence in different ways. So for example, if you went, I guess you'll have to believe that I'm improvising that. For my students then, this would be a part of their practice that they would dedicate maybe 15 minutes at some point in their practice, where they would be internally generating an emotion and then creating in sound that emotion. In a sheet that I have given to my students a number of years ago, which I call the 10 Principles of Work and Motion, number 10 states this: accuracy and ease of playing is enhanced, in some cases made possible, by coordinating the physical gestures of performance with the emergence of sound as it unfolds in the piece we are playing. In its highest form, it is a perfect correspondence of human physiology, instrumental topography, and musical syntax. It acknowledges the relation of sound to time and space. The Targa piece that I just played is a really excellent example. I realize that's a lot of words, but essentially what it's saying is a composer, particularly the composer that's writing for an instrument that they play, is looking for a way of matching how the body moves with the structure of the instrument and then with the grammar and syntax of the piece that they're writing. And as I say, this little miniature is a perfect example. In the piece, the open string, the open B string, is an accompaniment. And particularly at the moment where you have the large shift to the upper register of the guitar, the open B string corresponds also with the closure of the phrase where you're going to do a slight rallentando. So Targa, in this piece, the composer, has, as I say, coordinated the space and temporal element of shifting with the grammatical element of the cadence. In tonal music, notes can behave like characters, and in the opening of this beautiful little miniature gondoliera by Johann Caspar Merz, the high G is the hero of this phrase, this opening section of this piece. And as you heard, it starts out as part of a dissonant chord, and then a resolved chord, and then a dissonant chord, and then a resolved chord, C, G, and then G again. So even though there are no markings in this score as to relative differences of dynamics, because of the relationship of the G to the harmony underneath, one is really obliged to show that with different dynamics. And one of the things that I talk about with my students in their interpretive training is that harmony is always about relationship, and the melody is in context to that. So just the first line here. places what is merely an idea into a musical context. And one can see also that Merz rhythmically activates the second dissonance with a dotted note and then also with a leap from the G. The Openaje on the Death of Debussy by Manuel de Falla that you just heard is a great example of really the title of this talk, Motion and Emotion in Music. One of the things that I talk to my students about is the importance of developing different types of choreographies that they equate with a particular sound. Indeed, I think that fluency for a concert player is essentially conjoining a movement in the hands with a particular sound. The movement and the sound for a fluent player are really one thing. They're like thunder and lightning. They're not two distinct things, but two different parts of the same phenomenon. One's aural, one's visual, but they're both related to the same event of an atmosphere ionized that's going a little bit crazy. At the very beginning of this piece, you have that great dissonant chord. It's often played with this right-hand fingering. I like to pull the thumb through all three strings, and as you can hear, it not only gives a louder sound, but it gives a more raw and rough and anguished quality to the chords. So the actual choreography itself, whether you use the thumb, index, and middle finger, or the thumb pulling through, changes both the timbre, but also, as you can hear, the emotion of the chord. Or now with PIM. I think, as I say, this is a good example of choreography as it relates to timbre and emotion. Also, later in this phrase, that great B flat. One of the things also I think that's a hallmark of performances that we remember are performances that have special notes. In this case, not just special notes in the piece, but special notes in the way that you play it. To make that B flat brighter and to put a little bit of a whammy bar vibrato on it brings out the slight hysteria that's happening harmonically at that point in the piece. The piece you just heard is Lied ohne Worte, also by Johann Caspar Mayer. It's another really lovely Romantic period miniature. The beginning of this piece brings out the whole issue of vocalization, which is a different kind of emotion in music. And this phrase at the beginning, that begins the piece has this wonderful little leap. Now all of those notes are really eighths, so those are the arithmetic durations of those notes. Pitches have two kinds of duration. One is arithmetic, which are the notated rhythms, and the other is expressive. So as you can see, the arithmetic durations, while in one sense they're correct, are utterly wrong, that they show no vocal character at all. Whereas shows the energy that's needed, that's needed to actually make that leap if you were singing. Now, at the end of the piece, this same phrase occurs once again, and it comes after a very tempestuous middle part of this section. I just played the intro at the beginning. When I play it at the end, I play it in what's called an upper position on the guitar. Which, as you can hear, gives a much more muted timbre, and you can vibrate it more. As opposed to the beginning where I play it in lower position. The open position has, for me, the tone color itself embodies a character of naivete, of innocence, of freshness. And then the upper position, closed position, in addition to being more muted, has a quality of reminiscence or nostalgia. So here, the motion is from one area of the neck to another area of the neck to create a different emotional atmosphere with the same pitches. In continuing the Märzfest, this piece is called Capriccio. This is a very good example, or I guess it's a very good potential environment for the use of tone color as it is allied with consonance and dissonance within harmony. at the beginning of the melody itself. As I'm playing those arpeggios, starting with certainly one of the strengths of the guitar is its large timbral palette and the detail that one can bring to it. So as I'm going, you can hear once again that, I mean, essentially the brighter timbre is more dissonant. The more round and full timbre is more consonant. And I think one doesn't need to go to a conservatory even to hear that if you play or even the same decibel level, this is a more active sound and this is a more complete, better, restful sound. Also in this score, this is a really good example of Romantic period composers giving us words. At this section, he has marked risoluto. If you were playing right at tempo, it doesn't really give the sense of resolve, of commitment to those chords. By doing a slight allargando at the end, it gives the sense of the resolution of the speaker.